Captain Jai-ho Park stood at the window of the International Space Station, looking at Earth below. The blue planet spun slowly, peaceful, and quiet. But everything was about to change. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Officer Yujin at the communication station. Her hands moved quickly over the controls. "It's not like anything we've seen before." Jai-ho walked over to her station. The signal was clear and strong, definitely not space junk or a satellite. As he watched the screen, patterns began to form. They weren't random. They were too organized, too precise. "Get me mission control," he ordered, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was racing. "And wake up Dr. Do-Young Kim. We need his expertise on this." 20 minutes later, Do-Young arrived at the communications room, still pulling on his station uniform. He was young for a lead scientist, only 32, but he was the best at decoding complex patterns. His eyes widened as he saw the signal. "This isn't from Earth," Do-Young said, his voice barely a whisper. "The pattern is too complex, too perfect." He typed rapidly on his keyboard, and new images appeared on the screen. "Look at this structure. It's a language, but it's using mathematics as its base." Suddenly, all the screens in the station flickered. A new signal, stronger than the first, burst through their communications system. The computers started translating it automatically, turning the mathematical patterns into words. "To the inhabitants of Earth," Yujin read out loud, her voice shaking slightly. "We are the Aldari. We come with urgent news and a warning. Your species is in danger." The message continued, but Jai-ho was already moving. He activated the station's emergency protocols and sent alerts to every major space agency on Earth. Years of training kicked in. This was humanity's first contact with alien life, and it was happening on his watch. "Dr. Kim," Jai-ho called out, "what can you tell me about this signal? Could it be a hoax?" Do-Young shook his head. "No way. The signal is coming from beyond Saturn's orbit. And look at how it's structured. It's teaching our computers how to translate it as it comes in. We couldn't do that. Nobody on Earth could do that." More messages followed. The Aldari wanted to make contact. They were sending a ship. They needed to speak to Earth's leaders. It was urgent. But something caught Do-Young's attention. Hidden in the signal was another pattern, something the automatic translators hadn't caught. He isolated it, studied it, and felt a chill run down his spine. "Captain," he said, his voice low, "there's something else here. The Aldari are scared, really scared. Look at these sub-patterns. They're like emotional markers. Whatever made them travel across the galaxy to find us, it terrified them." Jai-ho looked at Earth through the window again. The peaceful blue planet kept spinning, unaware that everything was about to change. Humanity had just taken its first step into a much larger universe, but Do-Young's discovery suggested it wasn't going to be a friendly welcome. "Send a message to Mission Control," Jai-ho ordered. "Tell them we need to prepare for visitors. And get me direct lines to every major military command center. Something tells me we're going to need them." As the crew rushed to follow his orders, Jai-ho couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, but it wasn't the one they had hoped for. The next few hours were a blur of activity. More messages came in. The Aldari ship would arrive in 3 days. They wanted to meet at the space station. Neutral territory, they called it. As Jai-ho coordinated with Earth's leaders and military commanders, he noticed Do-Young still working frantically at his station. "Found something else?" Jai-ho asked. Do-Young nodded slowly. "Maybe. There's something odd about their transmission method. It's like they're trying to hide their signal from something. Or someone." He looked up at Jai-ho, his face serious. "Whatever's coming, Captain, I don't think first contact is going to be our biggest problem." Jai-ho nodded grimly. In 3 days, everything would change. Humanity was about to step onto the galactic stage. But from the fear in the Aldari's message, It might be stepping into a war zone. The blue planet kept spinning below them, its people still unaware that their whole world was about to turn upside down. 3 days after the first contact, the underground military facility in Seoul buzzed with tension. Commander Hae-jin Lee stood before the large screen, studying the images of the Aldari ship that now orbited Earth. The alien vessel was beautiful in a strange way, all curved lines and shimmering metal that seemed to change color in the sunlight. "The Aldari representatives are ready to begin," announced the facility's communications officer. The room fell silent as the screen changed to show the alien delegation aboard the International Space Station. The Aldari looked almost human, except for their silver-tinted skin and large, dark eyes. Their leader, who called himself First Speaker, began the transmission with a slight bow, a gesture they had clearly learned to show respect to Earth customs. "People of Earth," the First Speaker said, his voice translated smoothly by their advanced systems, "we bring grave news. A species known as the Nexus is moving through this part of the galaxy. They destroy every civilization they find. Your world is in their path." Commander Lee watched as the room erupted in questions. He stayed quiet, observing Captain Jeho Park on the space station as he stood beside the aliens. Jeho's face was serious, but calm. "How much time do we have?" Commander Lee asked when the noise died down. "Less than 1 Earth year," the First Speaker replied. "The Nexus are methodical. They do not rush, but they never stop. They have destroyed 12 civilizations in the past century alone." The room grew cold with fear, but Commander Lee noticed something odd. "You said they destroy every civilization they find. Yet you're here. You survived." The First Speaker's expression changed slightly. "We hide. We run. We survive because we never fight. The Nexus are too powerful." On the space station, Do-young Kim worked quietly at his console, analyzing the Aldari's every word and movement. Something about their story bothered him. He sent a private message to Soo-jae Kang, Earth's leading defense systems engineer. "They're not telling us everything." Commander Lee stepped closer to the screen. "Tell us about their weapons, their tactics, everything you know." As the Aldari described the Nexus, Soo-jae Kang took rapid notes in her Seoul office. The aliens spoke of weapons that could shatter planets, ships that could travel through stars, and soldiers that felt no fear or pain. But with each description, Soo-jae's frown deepened. "That's impossible," she muttered, catching Commander Lee's attention. "Their weapon descriptions violate basic laws of physics. Unless..." Her eyes widened as she typed furiously into her computer. Commander Lee noticed her excitement. "Engineer Kang, you have something to share." Soo-jae stood up, her voice steady despite her discovery. "Sir, if I'm right, the Nexus aren't as unstoppable as the Aldari think. Every weapon they described has a fundamental flaw. We just need to understand why the Aldari never saw it." The First Speaker tilted his head, showing the first sign of confusion. "Our data is correct. The Nexus cannot be fought." "Maybe not your way," Commander Lee said slowly, an idea forming. "But we humans have a long history of doing the impossible." He turned to address the room. "I have a proposal, but many of you won't like it. Instead of running or hiding, we prepare to fight." The Aldari delegates looked shocked. Even some human leaders protested. But Lee noticed something interesting. The First Speaker's reaction seemed more worried than surprise, as if this was exactly what he feared humans would say. Do-young's message flashed on Commander Lee's private screen. "Sir, I've decoded more of their original signal. There's something huge they're not telling us about the Nexus, and I think I know why they really came to Earth." Commander Lee kept his face neutral as he read the message. He looked at the Aldari on the screen, then at the worried faces of Earth's leaders around him. Whatever the truth was, one thing was clear. Humanity's response to this threat would have to be unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. "First Speaker," Lee said firmly, "we thank you for your warning. Now let us show you how Earth handles threats. The first speaker's expression was unreadable, but for a moment, something like fear flickered in those alien eyes. Humanity's response was not what they had expected, or perhaps, Lee thought, not what they had hoped for. In the weeks following the Aldari warning, Earth changed. The secret facility beneath Seoul became the headquarters of the Earth Defense Initiative, EDI. Engineer Sujai Kang had turned the main laboratory into her personal workshop, where pieces of Aldari technology lay carefully arranged on multiple workbenches. The Aldari weapons are advanced, Suji explained to Commander Lee as she showed him her latest work, but they're designed to fight the Nexus in only one way. That's why they always fail. She picked up what looked like a small silver cube. We're doing something different. Down the hall, Do-Young Kim worked in his own lab, surrounded by screens showing Aldari transmissions. Captain Jae-ho Park stood behind him, watching as patterns scrolled past. There, Do-Young said, pointing to a sequence. The Aldari are sending coded messages back to their fleet. They're surprised by how fast we're learning their technology. And they're worried about something. Jae-ho leaned closer to the screen. Worried about us, or about the Nexus? Neither. Do-Young typed quickly, bringing up more data. They're worried about what we might discover. Look at these readings from their ship. They're using far more power than they need for just communication and life support. In the main command center, Commander Lee reviewed reports from around the world. Russia had converted its entire Siberian industrial belt into weapon factories. The United States had turned over its top research facilities to the EDI. China had emptied its strategic reserves to build defensive installations. For once, Earth's nations weren't fighting each other. They were all working together, preparing for something bigger. The Aldari representatives want to speak with you, an aide told Commander Lee. They seem upset about our progress. In the conference room, the first speaker's silver face showed clear concern. Your weapons development is proceeding too quickly. We advise slowing down to ensure safety. Commander Lee smiled politely. We appreciate your concern, but Earth has its own way of doing things. Later that day, Sujai called an emergency meeting. As Earth's military leaders gathered, she stood before them with a confident expression. We've been studying the Aldari defensive systems, she said. They're good, but they're built on fear. They're designed to run away, to hide, to survive. We're building something different. Something that fights back. She brought up a display showing her new design. The Aldari never thought to combine their technology with human innovation. They're too careful, too afraid of failure. But we're not afraid to try new things. In his lab, Do-Young made another discovery. He immediately called Captain Jae-ho and Commander Lee. The Aldari ships aren't just watching us, he explained, showing them his findings. They're positioned like they're waiting for something. And look at these power readings. They've been rising steadily for the past week. Commander Lee studied the data. Could they be preparing to help us fight the Nexus? Or preparing for something else? Jae-ho said quietly. The next day, Earth's first interstellar warship was ready for its test flight. Built in record time using a combination of Aldari technology and human engineering, it represented something new in the galaxy. A ship designed not to run, but to fight. Jae-ho stood on the bridge of the new ship, named Defender, as Sujai ran through the final checks. Do-Young monitored the Aldari ships from his station, watching their every move. Commander Lee's voice came through the communication system. Captain Park, you have permission to launch. Show us what humanity's first warship can do. As the Defender lifted off, Suji noticed something on her instruments. The Aldari ships had suddenly changed position, moving into a new formation. She shared a worried look with Do-Young. Humanity was ready to face the Nexus. But first, they might have to face the truth about their supposed allies. The attack came without warning. The Mars colony's sensors detected the Nexus ships just moments before they appeared. Massive black vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. In the Earth Defense Initiative headquarters, alarms blared. Commander Hae-Jin Lee rushed to the control room, where screens showed the unfolding attack. "Get me Captain Park on the Defender," he ordered. The Defender was already moving to protect the Mars colony. Captain HFY Park stood on the bridge, watching as the Nexus ships approached. "Suji," he called to his engineer, "are the new defense systems ready?" "Yes, sir," Suji replied from her station. Her hands moved quickly over the controls, activating the systems she had designed. "But we've never tested them against real Nexus weapons." The first Nexus shot came fast, a beam of dark energy that should have torn through the Mars colony's shields. But when it hit Suji's defensive screen, something unexpected happened. The beam scattered, breaking apart like light through a prism. In his laboratory on Earth, Do-Young Kim watched the data stream in. "That's impossible," he muttered, then louder. "Commander Lee, the Nexus weapons, they're not what the Aldari told us they were." The Nexus ships paused their attack. In that moment of confusion, Captain Park made his decision. "All weapons, fire." The Defender's new weapons, a combination of Aldari technology and human innovation, struck the nearest Nexus ship. The result shocked everyone. The Nexus ship's armor, supposed to be impenetrable according to the Aldari, cracked under the impact. Do-Young's voice came through the communication system. "Their armor isn't special. They just never faced anyone who tried to fight back properly." More Nexus ships arrived, surrounding the Defender. But Suji's defense systems held firm. "Captain," she called out, "I'm seeing a pattern in their attacks. They're not adapting. They keep using the same strategy over and over." Commander Lee watched from Earth as the battle unfolded. The Aldari representatives stood nearby, their silver faces showing clear shock. "This is impossible," the first speaker said. "No one has ever survived a Nexus first strike." "Maybe," Commander Lee replied. "That's because no one ever tried to fight them like humans do." The battle raged on. The Mars colony took some hits, but its defenses held. The Defender moved with unexpected agility, its human crew adapting tactics faster than the Nexus could respond. Suji's systems proved more effective with each passing minute as they learned from each Nexus attack. Then Do-Young made another discovery. "Captain Park, Commander Lee, the Nexus ships, their power readings matched the hidden signals I detected from the Aldari ships." The first speaker stepped back, but Commander Lee was faster. Security teams moved in, surrounding the Aldari delegation. "I think," Lee said calmly, "it's time you told us the whole truth about the Nexus." On the Defender, Captain Park watched as the Nexus ships suddenly began to retreat. They had lost 3 vessels, something that had never happened before in their history. The Mars colony was damaged but intact. Humanity had just done the impossible. "Sir," Suji called out, her voice excited, "I know why our defenses worked so well. The Nexus weren't prepared for our approach because they've never faced it before. They're not invincible. They just never met anyone who fought back in the right way." As the Nexus ships disappeared into space, Earth celebrated its first victory. But in the Seoul Command Center, Commander Lee faced the Aldari delegation with hard eyes. The truth about humanity's supposed allies was about to come out, and it would change everything they thought they knew about this war. In the secure room beneath Seoul, the first speaker of the Aldari sat across from Commander Hae-Jin Lee. The alien's silver skin seemed duller now, as if the truth weighed heavily upon it. "The Nexus," Do-Young Kim said, standing next to Commander Lee, "are not a separate species at all, are they?" He placed his tablet on the table, showing the matching energy signatures from both Aldari and Nexus ships. The first speaker lowered his head. "No, they are not." On the Defender, still orbiting Mars, Captain HFY Park received the transmission of the interrogation. Suji Kang stood beside him, her face showing shock as the truth emerged. "The Nexus are Aldari," the first speaker explained. "They are our military force, our way of controlling the galaxy. We find developing civilizations, warn them about the Nexus, Then offer them a choice: hide under our protection, or be destroyed. Commander Lee's voice remained calm, though his hands tightened on the table. You created a false enemy to force other species to submit to you. It worked for 10,000 years, the first speaker said. Every species chose to hide, to live under our guidance. Until now, until humans. Do-Young pulled up more data on his tablet. You didn't just warn us. You studied us. Every transmission, every interaction. You were testing our responses. In her workshop on the Defender, Suji suddenly understood something. She rushed to the bridge, interrupting the transmission. Captain, Commander, the Aldari technology they gave us. They never expected us to improve it. They thought we'd just copy it, like every other species did. The first speaker nodded slowly. Your species was supposed to react like all the others. You were supposed to beg for protection, not build weapons, not fight back, not discover the truth. Commander Lee stood up, walking to the window overlooking the city. And now, what happens when the galaxy learns that the great Nexus threat is just the Aldari military in disguise? That cannot happen, the first speaker said, his voice turning cold. We have maintained peace for 10,000 years. If the truth spreads, chaos will follow. Captain Park's voice came through the speakers. Commander, we're detecting multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Aldari vessels, a lot of them. They're not here for peace this time, Do-Young warned, checking his readings. Commander Lee turned back to the first speaker. You're not just worried about us fighting back. You're worried because we proved the Nexus can be beaten. If other species learn this, all our work would be undone. The first speaker finished. We cannot allow that. Suji's voice cut through the tension. Captain, Commander, I've finished analyzing their ship designs. The Aldari have been using the same technology, the same tactics for thousands of years. They never needed to improve because no one ever fought back. Commander Lee looked at the first speaker with new understanding. You've forgotten how to adapt, how to change. That's why our improvements to your technology shock you so much. Sir, Captain Park reported, the Aldari fleet is moving into attack position. They're not pretending to be the Nexus this time. Orders. Commander Lee studied the first speaker's face, seeing fear there for the first time. Not fear of the false Nexus, but fear of change, of losing control. Humanity had done more than just resist. They had shattered a system of control that had lasted for millennia. Captain Park, Lee said firmly, show them why humanity was the wrong species to try to control. The Aldari fleet filled Earth's orbital space with hundreds of silver ships. They no longer hid behind the Nexus disguise. These were their true vessels, showing their full military power for the first time in thousands of years. On the Defender's Bridge, Captain Jai-Ho Park watched the enemy fleet with calm eyes. Suji, he called to his engineer. Are the modifications ready? Yes, sir, Suji replied from her station. Every ship in Earth's defense fleet has been upgraded with my improvements. The Aldari won't know what hit them. The first speaker's voice came through all channels, broadcasting to every human ship and station. Your species has forced our hand. Surrender now, and some of your people may survive under our direct control. Commander Hae-Jin Lee responded from Earth Defense Headquarters. You've forgotten something important about humans. We don't just fight when we can win. We fight when we must, no matter the odds. Do-Young Kim, monitoring communications, noticed something strange. Commander, the Aldari ships, they're moving into the same formation they've used for thousands of years. They're not even trying to adapt. Of course not, Sujo said, understanding dawning on her face. They've never needed to change their tactics. No one ever survived long enough to make them learn. Captain Park gave the order that would change everything. All ships, initiate defense pattern home. The Earth fleet suddenly split apart, moving in ways the Aldari had never seen before. Small ships darted between the larger vessels, creating confusion in the Aldari targeting systems. Suji's improved shields absorbed hits that should have destroyed them, learning and adapting with each impact. In the Seoul Command Center, the captured first speaker watched in growing horror as human ships performed maneuvers his people had never considered possible. "This is not how space combat should work," he protested. "Your tactics violate all established protocols." Commander Lee allowed himself a small smile. "That's because you've forgotten the most important rule of survival. Adapt or die. Your people have been standing still for 10,000 years. Humanity never stops changing, never stops improving." On the Defender, Suji's voice rose with excitement. "Captain, their ships can't adjust to our pattern changes. Their targeting computers are designed to fight enemies who follow their rules." "Then let's break some more rules," Captain Park ordered. "All ships, execute pattern thunderstorm." The Earth fleet's formation suddenly shifted again. Smaller ships used the gravity of larger ones to slingshot themselves at impossible angles. Suji's modified weapons fired in synchronized patterns that overwhelmed the Aldari's ancient shield designs. Du Young, watching from his station, understood what was happening. They've been the strongest for so long, they've forgotten how to face a real challenge. But humans, we've always been the underdogs. We've always had to think differently to survive. The battle turned decisively. Aldari ships, despite their advanced technology, couldn't handle Earth's constantly changing tactics. Their formation broke apart as they tried to deal with attacks coming from directions they had never guarded against. "Sir," Suji reported, "other alien ships are arriving at the edge of the system, but they're not joining the fight. They're watching." Commander Lee nodded. "Of course they are. For the first time in 10,000 years, someone is showing the galaxy that the Aldari can be beaten." The first speaker stood in the command center, his silver face showing an emotion no human had seen before on an Aldari, fear mixed with realization. "You're not just defeating us," he said quietly. "You're showing everyone else how to do it too." The battle above Earth had ended, but its effects were spreading across the galaxy. Captain Jeho Park stood on the Defender's bridge, watching as ships from dozen different alien species approached Earth. These weren't warships. They were diplomatic vessels. "They're all requesting permission to speak with Earth's leaders," Du Young Kim reported from his communication station. Some of these species, according to the Aldari records, they'd been hiding in fear for centuries. In the Seoul Command Center, Commander Hae-Jin Lee met with the first speaker one last time. The Aldari leader's silver skin had lost its shine, and his proud posture was gone. "You don't understand what you've done," the first speaker said quietly. "The stability of 10,000 years, gone in a single day." "No," Commander Lee replied firmly. "You don't understand what we've shown the galaxy. There's a difference between true peace and forced submission." Suja Kang entered the room with her latest findings. "Sir, we've decoded more of their historical records. The Aldari didn't just control other species, they actively prevented them from developing new technologies. They were keeping everyone weak on purpose." On the main screen, reports came in from across the galaxy. Species that had lived under Aldari control for generations were emerging from hiding. The Aldari peacekeeping fleets, the fake Nexus ships, were retreating everywhere as their deception fell apart. The Aldari claimed they were protecting peace, Du Young explained to the gathered Earth leaders. But they were really just preventing anyone else from growing strong enough to challenge them. A new alien ship approached the Defender. Unlike the fearful species they had met before, these visitors stood tall and proud. They called themselves the Crow, and they had been one of the first species forced into hiding by the Aldari. "For 10,000 years, we believed we were too weak to fight," the Kral ambassador said. "Then we saw humans, a species younger than our oldest cities, stand up and prove that the Aldari could be defeated." Commander Lee watched as more diplomatic ships arrived. Each species had a similar story: centuries or millennia of hiding, of limiting themselves, of living in fear of the Nexus. Now they were free, and they all wanted to learn from humanity. "Your people did more than defeat our ships. the first speaker admitted. You showed the galaxy that our power was built on lies, that we could be resisted, that we could be beaten. Suji, who had been studying the alien ships in orbit, made an interesting observation. Sir, these species, they're already starting to modify their ships using our techniques. They're learning, adapting, just like we do. Of course they are, Commander Lee said. That's what intelligent beings do naturally, when they're not being held back by fear. As the day continued, more ships arrived. Some brought thanks, others brought offers of alliance. A few even brought ancient technologies they had hidden from the Aldari, offering them now to the species that had shattered their chains. Du Young, monitoring the communications, smiled as he reported, Sir, they're calling Earth the world that woke the galaxy. Some of them are already adopting our military tactics, our way of thinking. Captain Park, watching from the Defender, understood what they had really done. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Aldari. They had shown the galaxy how to be strong again, how to think independently, how to fight back. We didn't just change the balance of power, he said to his crew. We showed them something they had forgotten. That true strength comes from facing challenges, not avoiding them. 1 year after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy had changed completely. In the grand meeting hall of the newly established Galactic Council on Earth, Commander Heijin Lee stood before representatives of over 50 alien species. The chamber, built with technology from a dozen worlds, represented something entirely new: true cooperation between equals. The age of hiding is over, Commander Lee addressed the assembly. The time of genuine progress has begun. Captain Jaho Park, now Admiral of Earth's expanding space fleet, sat beside representatives from former Aldari-controlled worlds. The Defender, his original ship, had become a symbol of resistance and innovation. Its design had inspired a new generation of vessels across the galaxy. Humanity's greatest gift to us wasn't their victory, said the Kral ambassador, standing to speak. It was showing us how to think differently, how to grow stronger through challenge rather than hiding from it. In her vast new research center, Su Jiakang worked with engineers from 20 different species. The facility's walls displayed hundreds of new designs, combinations of technologies that the Aldari had kept separated for millennia. Every day brought new breakthroughs as species shared their knowledge freely for the first time. The Aldari's greatest mistake, Suji explained to a group of alien students, wasn't trying to control us. It was forgetting that real strength comes from adapting and changing. Do Yum Kim had become Earth's chief diplomat to other worlds. His ability to understand patterns had proven invaluable in helping species work together after centuries of isolation. In his office, he kept a piece of the original Aldari communication device that had started everything. Each species brings something unique, he told Commander Lee during a private meeting. The Kral's ancient wisdom, the Varent's hidden technologies, the Gen's artistic vision. But they all needed humanity's spark, our refusal to accept limitations. The Aldari themselves had changed. Under the watchful eyes of the Galactic Council, they were learning to be part of the galaxy rather than its controllers. Their silver ships no longer inspired fear, and their technology was now shared openly. We forgot what it meant to grow, the former first speaker admitted in a public address. We chose stagnation over progress, control over cooperation. Humanity reminded the galaxy of what we had all forgotten. Commander Lee stood at the window of the council chamber, looking out at the busy space lanes around Earth. Ships of all designs and origins moved freely, carrying trade, knowledge, and cooperation between worlds. Earth had become the heart of a new galactic civilization, not through conquest or control, but through inspiration. Did you ever imagine this? Admiral Park asked, joining him at the window. When we first received that Aldari warning, did you think it would end like this? Lee shook his head. We didn't just change the galaxy's power structure. We changed how species think about power itself. In schools across the galaxy, young beings of all species studied the Battle of Earth. They learned not just about the tactics that defeated the Aldari, but about the human spirit that made it possible. The determination to face challenges, the creativity to find new solutions, the courage to stand up when others would hide. Earth had become both respected and feared, but not in the way the Aldari had been. Species respected humanity's innovation and determination. They feared falling back into the old ways of stagnation and submission. The galaxy had awakened, and it would never sleep again. The stars belong to everyone now, Commander Lee said, watching the ships pass by. And together, we'll go further than any species could have gone alone.